So, as we were saying, from the patriarchal logic, the male identifies himself with the father, perhaps because they're the same sex and because he is who holds the power within the house. And if there is no man in that family who exercises that power, the boy will receive messages from the female figures such as, "You are the man of the house, how strong you are, you can, you are the best." A girl, however, is told the opposite. She has to function as the caregiver, the weak one, the one who cannot, always involved in something referring to fragility. Within these mandates, which are typical of patriarchy, we can see that there are certain messages and a certain game that starts from childhood. And it's typical to find in schools that girls go to play with costumes, whereas the boys go to play with cars or with things having to do with strength or sports. There is another mandate that has to do with how both the girl and the boy bear pain. The male is asked to be male and endure the pain, while the girl dealing with some pain or fragility is comforted. What begins in the family extends socially. We see that there are, in the social structure, predominantly masculine places that are, in general, places of power, and the rest of the roles that do not have to do with power are occupied by women. The ones that weave, the ones that clean, the ones that care for others, the ones that cook, the ones that are the workers. On the other hand, patriarchal logic is based on a binary relationship, which is the dominant, the dominated, the powerful, the powerless, the active, the passive, the masculine, the feminine. This is where men develop aggressiveness and violence as characteristics of their personality to assert themselves. Power is presented as a natural requirement due to its subtle incorporation into the everyday. Within this logic, what we see is that men are expected to hold the dominant power in all relationships. In recent years, women have had all the more possibilities due to the feminist movements from all the social organizations that pushed and that opened the possibility for women beginning to speak, trying to break this bond of domineering dominant. In the 70s, studies began to appear that initiated the differentiation between sex and gender. Assuming that sex is a biological attribute with which we are born, we know that it is not unchangeable by the advances of surgery and medicine, but it is a biological attribute that comes along with the species. However, the construction of gender is cultural, and it is from there that one can work with children to break the stereotype of what is culturally and socially accepted or impelled to constitute the masculine gender and what is the feminine gender. Although it is true that the greatest amount of statistics and studies are based on violence exerted by men on women, in recent years, research on violence where the man is the victim in the relationship has begun to appear. There are many causes why, and there is little data on this. Researchers say that the main cause is precisely because the man in the macho society is ashamed to report that he is a victim of abuse. So it seemed interesting to us in this chapter to talk about what happens in the relationships of couples with violence, with a type of violence that is much more difficult to detect, which is psychological violence. It is quite clear to detect what is physical violence, what is sexual violence, but psychological violence is more entangled in modes of relationship, modes of discourse, advertising images, and what is socially correct, and sustained issues naturalized in the relations between men and women, so much so that they are not thought of or are not detected as situations of violence. The couple's relationship forms identity and also helps to construct the identity of the other. The couple shares, the couple discusses, the couples live together, and it is from there that the love also, and from signs where intimate relationships are produced and built. And that is why it is not surprising that the majority of situations of violence occur in relationships that have some degree of intimacy and knowledge of the victim. The 21st century dares us to have the ability to have information sent and received in an instant. And that is also an excellent opportunity and possibility for being interconnected. It also means that we should be careful about how and in what way the media, information, the internet, and social networks become part of the lives of our children who are in formation. And in our lives also, when we talk before patriarchal society, we see that there are many vestiges of the roles and the stereotyped functions of the difference of gender in the media or information, in ads, and in the social networks. The body of the woman is a salable body. It is a desirable body. The body has a price. It is an object. And what we see all the time in the media is the message which girls begin to receive to have an excessively eroticized relationship with the body and the way in which they relate to the outside. This, of course, is not without consequences. One thing, for example, is sexual freedom and the ability of boys to experience and have sex much more freely. And another thing has to do with boys prematurely initiating a sex life when they are not yet prepared psychologically. We believe that the media exerts a huge influence on the division of roles about the role the body plays for both men and women. And on the side, the pressure to be beautiful and the realization that is taught to girls in relation to the more I have, the better that I am. To work interdisciplinarily, we don't define as each discipline carrying from their own field of work one view, but we believe that to work interdisciplinarily has to do with being able to share questions, to be able to share problems, of course, from different views and from a language that each discipline has of its own. We know that violence has reached the point that I arrived at earlier because it is still diversified in its way of approach. The doctors have a part, the lawyers have one part, the justice system has another part, the psychologists have another part, the doctors have their part, the interpreters have another part. It is a complex problem that must be considered in the complexity of the phenomenon, and this complexity implies thinking about it from a new paradigm. We grew up and were educated within positivism, where the subject was one thing and the object was something else, and things existed if they could be demonstrated. We are now facing a new reality where there are many questions and where the paradigms of the 19th and 18th century cannot give an answer to what is happening to us. That is why we believe that from complexity and a complex approach, there is a new way, and the way in which we can enter and we can solve the problems we are facing now in the 21st century.